Hello and welcome to this podcast, Little Girls Aren't Taught This. I am your host, Self-Love Lydia, and this is a self-love podcast unlike no other. Within this podcast, we will go into all of the things that we should have been taught as little girls that would have helped us feel empowered, connected, and just unapologetic as we grew into women. I am the queen of deep transformations. I am on a mission to impact women around the world with self-love, and I am here to teach you how to be unapologetic and just step into your power. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Little Girls Aren't Taught This. Today's episode is all around healing heartbreak. I'm going to be talking through how you can navigate grief, feeling lost and uncertain when you end a relationship or, a relationship breaks up. And I want to just chat through the stages of heartbreak and the tools and techniques that you can draw on or pull on to help you when you are experiencing a period of heartbreak or, like loss, uncertainty or grief around any kind of relationship in your life. So personally, I've not spoken about this anywhere, but this is something I've been navigating over the past few months, and holy fuck, I thought I've been to my edges. One of the things I realised is heartbreak has taken me to my edges and actually really triggered this new period of growth and healing. And I think that often happens when we have what feels like a death. So, heartbreak often feels like a death of a part of self. And it's really interesting how when you begin to come out the other side of that, how much that illuminates parts of self and how much you actually really get deep and dirty in healing when it comes to a relationship. That has been super interesting. I am going into childhood wounds. I am doing a lot of inner child healing. I am looking at patterns of self. It has really been incredible and super jarring and uncomfortable at the same time. And I think that's a lot to deal with. Emotionally, it's been exhausting. And, to have to deal with the polarity of heartbreak and the separation, and then also hold side by side parts of self that I continue to do the work around, it's just at times felt like it's a lot. And it's really important just to give ourselves grace and space as well. Because when you are in the thick of all of this work, please do not underestimate how emotionally exhausting that is going to be for you, and how emotionally exhausting dealing with things like heartbreak and grief actually is. It's a lot of transition in your life. It brings a lot up, it's emotionally just devastating at times. And I think one of the biggest things that I've come back to that I'm going to talk about in this podcast is just self-compassion. That's so important, because you are the only person that's going to fully allow yourself to have that self-compassion. Other people can support you through a time of heartbreak or a time of, grieving. But essentially you are the person who is going to allow you to meet your own needs repeatedly over and over again. So that's just really important. So yes, I just want to talk through the cycles of grief and the cycles and the stages of heartbreak, and then share some things that I've personally been doing, some tools and techniques, and some of the things as well, just pulling on my experience working with women, pulling on my experience as a psychotherapist, things that I have been doing and also that I would give to my clients, or I will give as an offering to you listening to this podcast. So when I was writing the notes for this podcast, I just wrote a little snippet of, I just allowed myself to free write, and I want to open this podcast with it. So it just says, heartbreak triggers a deep innate sense of vulnerability, because to love is to be vulnerable. To love somebody is to let them in and share your heart and pieces of yourself. To intertwine yourself with another's dreams, hopes and desires. So when that is shattered, it's like parts of ourselves are lost. Healing heartbreak for me feels like a journey to rediscover those pieces. And that just felt very symbolic of the past few weeks, especially being in Bali, especially with all of the work that I have been doing, you know, all the self-development work and pulling on therapy, pulling on spiritual practices. It really feels like for me it's been a journey to rediscover those pieces. And along that path to rediscovering has been some, like I was saying before, some really uncomfortable moments where I've had to look at self and look at patterns and look at parts of me that I didn't even know were there and playing out. And I think when it comes to any relationship breakdown, that is one of the most beautiful things that we get from it, is a real opportunity to look at ourselves in the mirror, stripped back. And that's uncomfortable, but if we do that, we totally are able to grow through that process and become a totally different woman on the other side of it. So I just want to talk through the stages of heartbreak. So the first one that we go through is shock. So stages of heartbreak is really important, I think, to understand, because what it allows you to do is kind of track where you're up to in terms of stages. Because when you're in the thick of a breakup or the thick of, you know, grieving that person or in the pain of losing that person, whether you decided to end that relationship or that, you know, or vice versa, what it really allows you to do is it allows you to see that there's hope, and it allows you to see that there's movement that will be occurring week by week. So the way that you're feeling right now is not going to be the way that you will feel forever. Like, that is 100% certain. And I think the rate and the pace at which you go through those stages is dependent on so many different variables. You know, it's dependent on that relationship, what it meant to you. It's dependent on, is that relationship abusive? Are you with someone that's narcissistic? Is it an unhealthy relationship? It's dependent on attachment styles, you know, all of your stuff that you are also bringing into this relationship. It depends on the healing work that you're doing. You know, it's going to take you a lot longer to go through those stages if you're not doing some form of self-help work. And I hate that word self-help, but it kind of is that, isn't it? Whether it's therapy, whether it's going to women's circles, whether it's reading books, whether it's journaling, it doesn't matter what it is. But if you are just avoiding and numbing and burying your head in the sand, it's hard to shift out of that denial phase. So you can use this as a kind of like a journey that you are going to go through, and know that you will get to the point where acceptance and moving on, you will be in that phase at some point, okay? So one of the things I like to say to people is, if you give yourself about 6 weeks before you start to reflect on, are you actually moving out of the way that you're feeling? So 6 weeks is a good period of time before you will start to see if you are adjusting to the breakup. Are you able to move on without them? And then after that 6 week marker, if you still feel like you're in the early stages of this process, then maybe that's when you can go and look at getting therapy, or you can get some more professional support, or you can do more things in order to help you start to process the breakup. Because if you're stuck in that denial phase or that bargaining phase and you're just going back and forth, which I'm going to talk through, it doesn't allow you to get into the other parts of this, of the stages of a breakup, where you actually begin to process and move forward. So going into the first phase is shock. So whether you are broken up with, or whether you decide to end the relationship, there is going to be a period in heartbreak where you just feel shock. So that can just be a numbing. I can't believe this is happening. It all feels too much to process, not understanding why it's happened. And again, this is really important to look at. You know, if something's happened that's caused that breakdown in the relationship, you can be in shock about the experience. So this is not only relevant to the actual ending of a relationship, this is my interpretation of it. You can very much be in that phase of shock if something has happened that you didn't expect. So maybe your partner's being unfaithful, maybe you didn't think the relationship was going to break down, maybe you found something out about them that you didn't think was them, like it doesn't fit the imagery that you have of them. You know, there can be many things. Maybe they've done something to you that's completely overstepped a boundary or stepped a marker, and it really feels difficult to deal with. So that shock phase is really interesting, because that, if I pull on my own experience, that for me was where I was numbing a lot. You know, there's a lot of things that have happened. My situation is like, yeah, I am not going to go into my situation in terms of the specifics, which I don't think I need to, but in terms of just to pull on it as like a touchstone, for me, that experience was the most difficult part, being in the shock. That was when things were happening and I didn't understand why they were happening. It completely overwhelmed me, and that's where like my trauma response started to happen. So trauma response started to build in from the relationship, because there was so many things happening and I just didn't know why they were happening. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't process it, and it just emotionally overwhelmed me. So I was very much in that shock phase for a long time, and you will feel yourself in that phase at a point, and that's where you don't want to do anything. Like, you don't want to do the things that you know make you feel better. Maybe you just don't feel like you have the capacity to do that. Maybe you're just that heartbroken. All you can think about is numbing and just trying to get through day to day. And please let me make this clear. When something happens in a relationship, it doesn't have to be a big thing that like massively overcrosses a line. It can be little things that add up over time, or it can also be something that is very clearly wrong. Like, you know it's wrong, but if it feels wrong for you, that, and your body feels like it's wrong and you're unable to process that, well, then that's the most important thing, okay? It's not about what anybody else thinks. It's about how you experienced and how you process that thing. So the first stage of a breakup is heartbreak. Then you go into the denial phase. So that could be they'll come back, it'll be fine, or you deny that they're not the person that you are now being presented with. So this is a big one that we see in narcissism. When you're with somebody who's narcissistic, over time you begin to see that mask will slip. And what will happen is there will be a massive romanticization around the person and the relationship. And when things do happen that go against that, that's really where that denial will start to come in. So you will notice a fragmentation of self, where part of you says, no, you try to find a justification. So you notice that you will try to justify their behavior, or you will try to find some reasoning as to why it happened, because to accept what happened or to accept the person that they're now presenting as causes so much pain and triggers so much within you. You know, again, this is if we're talking about narcissistic relationships, trauma bonds, all of that stuff. It triggers so much emotional overwhelm and actually feels impossible to accept that. So to deny is the safe option. Okay, that is what you have done as a way to survive. That is what you have done as a way to stay in that relationship. If we just come back to a healthy relationship, still, denial is a big part of a breakup. So when you are denying the fact that you have broke up, you are still very much attaching yourself to them, the visions, all of these things. And the reason why denial happens when we come out of a relationship is because when we are with somebody and we are committed to them and we love them and we see a future, to deny that we are potentially losing that, or to accept that we are losing that, is so fucking hard. That is really where the grief comes in, and that is really where the acceptance of the newness, whatever that looks like, and the uncertainty and all of the shit that comes with that, it's a lot to accept, and it takes time to get into that space to accept it. So if you're denying, or if you feel that you are still hopeful that they will come back, or if you've had an argument or you've had a separation and maybe you've decided to end the relationship and you think that they're going to change, or you think that you're going to end up back together, or you think that, you know, maybe the break will just do us good. That can be a time of you being in that denial phase. Again, it's totally normal. It's just a protection thing that we do, because when we are attached to people, it's so hard to unattach and let them go because of everything that they symbolize and everything that they mean to us. So the next phase of heartbreak is bargaining. So again, this is where we see a lot of back and forth in a breakup. This is where you may notice, and just reflect on this in the past. If you've ever been through heartbreak, just really reflect on this. How has each of these phases impacted you? What have you done in each of these phases? How, when you reflect back on that, did that impact you? Did you get any growth from these? How can you be self-reflective, even if you're not in an experience of heartbreak now? Because being self-reflective is going to be massive for your growth and your self-awareness. So bargaining. So again, this is the stage in a breakup where we see the boundaries slip because you want that person so much in your life. The pain of not having them is so difficult to deal with that often we will do anything that we can in order just to self-soothe that part of us. So please do not beat yourself up around this. Please do not think that you are stupid or weak, because often this is what I hear women say. And even being totally transparent from my own experience in this, there can be a lot of self-judgment and a lot of self-shame and a lot of self-guilt for letting boundaries slip and going back into things that are not good for you and are not healthy for your growth. However, this part is totally normal in the breakup because you just want that person. Like, you are attached to that person. You are attached to everything that they mean. You are trying to avoid the grief. You are trying to avoid feeling uncertain and feeling lost, because they are scary, difficult emotions to deal with. Your heart wants to be in that relationship and wants to be with that person. You want everything that you spoke about, everything that you are attached to. It's your desires, it's everything. So when you bargain, you can often see that back and forth. Things that that you don't want all of a sudden may seem less important, because having that person in your life just seems like the most important thing. And often you see this if in this phase of people go back and immediately they know they shouldn't have went back. They just feel it. Their intuition is telling them they shouldn't have went back. They know their intuition is saying this is not for you. They know that when they go back and things start to fall back into place again, and everybody starts to get familiar in a relationship, and those old things start to come up again, or that pain that you experienced in the relationship starts to come up again. That is normal. That's bargaining. And it's a process. It's okay. Self-judgment is not really going to help anything in this moment. It's all about self-compassion. Okay. The next phase after that is anger. So this is a really crucial part of the breakup, because what you're able to notice is the parts of you that felt like the things that happened were unjust. And what you can also go through a period of is, if you ended a relationship, you can go through self-anger. So one of the things I would notice is, do you internalize this, or do you reflect this out in terms of things that happened to you? Do you feel angry for the fact that you broke up a relationship, even if you knew it was the best thing for you to do? Was there any part of you that felt anger? If you were in a relationship that wasn't good for you, or you felt like you were hurt, is there any part of you that feels anger towards the person? One of the things that I want to share is, when you are with somebody who is narcissistic, or you are in an unhealthy relationship, what you may notice is that you internalize this anger a lot more, and that can be down to gaslighting and manipulation and all of the things that happen in these unhealthy relationships. So the way that being with somebody who's narcissistic works, it's kind of like you're not allowed to feel anger. You're not allowed to feel like that unjust, because there was always some form of manipulation happening that was never truly letting you feel the impact of the behavior. So again, this is just something to take note of, and this is something that I explore with clients in therapy. I'm actually exploring it now with one of my clients. There's no anger, and any anger that comes up is really internalized towards self. You know, why did I put up with that? Why did I stay in that relationship? And actually the work, when you get professional help to help you through the process of heartbreak, especially if you're with somebody who's narcissistic or abusive, it's really a process of understanding why that was internalized and how you can begin to shift that outward, and how you can begin to process that in a way that allows your parts to start to speak up and feel like they have space to talk about the things that were done and how unfair that was. Because anger is so important, and this is why I done a post on it on my Instagram a few weeks ago, and I was talking about how we minimize the importance of anger, and actually anger is so important because it's the part of you that feels like you were treated unfairly, or you're angry that you were hurt, or you're angry that there's a trauma bond, or you're angry that somebody manipulated you or gaslit you. Like, it's such a natural, healthy part. And I think what happens is we massively suppress that part, whether it's shame, whether it's guilt, whether in the relationship there wasn't healthy space for us to be angry, whatever it is. I find that a lot of women aren't comfortable with tapping into that anger, and when they do feel it, it's internalized towards self. So one of the things I would just say is just notice that within your own experience. You know, in this phase of heartbreak, how did you internalize that, and how did you deal with this phase? And then also, I want you to understand, and I just want to share in this podcast, that it's okay for you to feel angry at your partner. It's okay for you to love them so much. It's okay for you to be heartbroken, and it's okay for you to be really fucking angry and express that in healthy ways against the person that you was with. It's okay for you to feel angry that you put so much time and effort into a relationship and it's broken down. It's okay for you to feel angry at the fact that you thought you had everything figured out and this was the life that you were meant to have, and now it's not happened. However that's playing out for you, it's totally normal, and it's a really, really important part of the breakup cycle. So the next part is sadness and grief. And what's really interesting is it will be difficult for you to fully go through this process if you're not spending time residing in each phase. You may feel the sadness and the grief whilst you're in the denial phase or the bargaining phase, but if you're not moving through each phase, then it's hard to kind of progress on to the next. Okay, sadness and grief, this is the hardest part of any breakup, because grief is horrific to feel. Like, it is just exhausting, and actually this is really, really difficult, because to grieve is to accept that we have lost parts, and that is so fucking unbelievably painful. And I think it's one of the most painful things that is massively, I think, underestimated or not spoken about enough. Like, it's not spoken about enough how grief can impact us with relationships, with jobs, with parts of self, identity. Like, it's so huge as an emotion, and we all feel it. So after anger comes sadness and grief, and this is really the part in the cycle that allows you to start to move on with your life. So again, knowing that you are going to go through the anger, the denial, the bargaining, the grieving, all of these different phases, I just wanted to include this because I wanted to let you know that it's so normal to be feeling these things, and we can't just skip parts. Okay, we don't get the right to skip parts when we love somebody and we're in a relationship and we experience heartbreak. So in this phase, you are grieving your desires, you are grieving your shared desires, you are grieving the memories and what they meant. So the biggest catalyst for grief is the thought of what if. It's your memories coming out and really over romanticizing, pulling on the things that you desire, pulling on the things that you were meant to have, and that really amplifies and triggers that part of us that is like, and now I'm never going to have that, which then spirals us into anxiety, uncertainty, feeling lost. Okay, so when you're able to like catch yourself in this moment and really do like reframe and really come into this moment and be like, no, this is just me grieving, and have the tools and have the techniques to be able to help you in this moment, it really anchors you into the future. Because when you're feeling that grief, again, this can be something that can really ignite that pull to go back to the relationship. So your memories are so crucial, you know, the intimate moments that you shared, everything that person meant to you, and it's the emotional attachment to the person. So this is when your attachment is really spiraling and really just wanting that self-soothing, that safety to be attached to that person again and everything that they symbolized. Okay, so it's okay for you to know that a relationship's not for you, but also still grieve everything that you had or everything that you thought you were going to have. And again, this can be massive if you're in a narcissistic relationship or an unhealthy one, because not only do you have to grieve the relationship, but you also have to grieve the person that you were with really not being that person that you thought they were. And that is very, very uncomfortable. So in the grieving phase, you see a massive romanticization of the situation. And this happens, again, your attachment is triggered, you're going to over-romanticize, it's totally normal, and it's a way to just draw us back in, okay? And this can happen especially in toxic narcissistic relationships. You get that pull. If you're in a trauma bond, I will do podcast episodes on all of these different things because they are really like complex and specific. But if you are in a trauma bond, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, or if you're in an unhealthy attached relationship, this is going to be the thing that's going to pull you back and draw you back, okay? And this, if it's with somebody like a narcissist, is literally as powerful as a mother's connection to her child. It's like an addiction if you're with somebody who's narcissistic. If you're in a trauma bond, it is like an addiction. So it's totally different for somebody, but it's still the same process. It's grief, however, it's just amplified, and it's a lot more complex if you are in a trauma bond or you're with somebody who's narcissistic, okay? The next phase after grieving and the sadness is acceptance. So you get into a phase where you finally begin to accept that you are in this new phase of life, that you are no longer with this person, that you are for the foreseeable on your own, that everything that you had with that person is no longer going to be. And that's a really beautiful phase, but it's really important to know that, because it can feel really difficult when you're in denial to ever feel like you're going to get to a space of acceptance. Of course, you love that person, you're still bonded, connected, you still hold hope for the future. But always please know that you can get to that phase of acceptance. Like it's just a natural part of this process. And then after acceptance comes moving on. It's self-explanatory what moving on is, but you will tend to see that people reflect back with that best thing that ever happened to me, like best thing. Or even if it isn't the best thing, knowing that you can move on and you will find love again and you will heal your heart again and you will smile again and you will be happy again. It's just knowing that you can have that, and moving on is really that phase where you begin to lean into that and feel that. And it feels like there's joy and there's life and there's connection after the heartbreak. So that is the cycle and the phases of heartbreak. And I just really want to pull on some techniques that you can begin to use when you are experiencing heartbreak, or you are feeling that uncertainty, or you're feeling a sense of loss, because these are the really triggering parts of a breakup. You know, if it's not for you, the fact that you're not with this person anymore, it's really everything that you were meant to have with that person. It's everything that that person symbolized for you. It's everything that that person meant, you know, the plans that you had, the attachment that you have. And again, like I just free wrote at the beginning of this, it's the vulnerability, because when we love somebody, we are so vulnerable. So to give all of ourselves and to be so vulnerable and then to not have it work out, it shatters the sense of self, it shatters our ego, it shatters our soul, because we have literally given everything of ourselves to this person. And I mean in a healthy way, you know, I don't mean in an unhealthy way when I say this. I mean, when you love somebody and you connect with somebody, you are yourself. They know the real you. You know, they see that vulnerability. So here are just some techniques that you can use to help you through this process. So, future scripting. This is really, really nice when you begin to get to a phase of, I would say, like grief. When you get to that phase, that's really nice, because what can tend to happen is when you're journaling, you can tend to stay stuck and journal on the feelings of grief and sadness. Now, what's really important is important that you're processing, but it's also really important that you're looking forward. It's also really important to flip the other side of the coin. So if there's grief and loss and sadness on one side, what's waiting for you on the other side of that? And it doesn't have to be something super extravagant. It could simply be that you just want to find a relationship where you're loved again. It could be that you just want to smile again. You just want to feel happy again. You just want to wake up in the morning and you don't have that desire to run to that person. So with future scripting, you just literally open your journal and you just start writing words or sentences of the things that you want in your future. And when you hold that side by side with journaling about the grief and the sadness, it really creates this beautiful dynamic where you're able to hold the duality of what's to come and what has been, okay? And then one of the other ways that you can take that further, and I done this and it works so beautifully, is make a Pinterest board of the things that you want in the future. So when I done this, I just typed words into Pinterest and I just saved them, and it was like future life. And every single day I go on and I just connect to that Pinterest board and it just reminds me of the future. So it's really, really helpful to keep me moving forward and keep me looking forward, and know that even in this time of uncertainty, it's gonna figure itself out. Like 100% it's going to figure itself out. And that is just a way that you can help yourself anchor or find some sense of groundedness in a time where everything feels so uncertain, especially if you're listening to this and there's children involved, there's houses, it's complicated, there's divorce involved. Just knowing that there's a life after this and tapping into a sense of what does that look like, it gives you something to move forward and work towards, okay? And this is not, I wouldn't even say this is like some big crazy manifestation, because when you're grieving, this is just my personal opinion, I don't want to fucking manifest the future, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not what it feels like. I don't want to put that attachment and that label on it of this is all the stuff I'm manifesting. It actually just felt like, let me just create something visual that I can come to that just serves as a way to ground. And right now I don't have to worry about doing the things in order to achieve that. I don't want to put any pressure on myself. I don't want to have to do all of the things. I just want to know that those simple things in life that will make me smile and make me happy and make my heart full again, I just want to create a visual board for that, and I just want to look at it. So again, being really conscious and being really aware of how you are choosing these things and doing these things in order to make you feel better, okay? Then one of the other things is talking it out in therapy, doing breath work, doing meditation, doing all of the things to commit to your own healing. And for me, this has been one of the biggest things since I came to Bali, is this phase of my life. I am so unbelievably committed to healing. I don't care if it's an expense to do that every single week in therapy. It's so fucking crucial for me, because this is one of the other things that I've heard a lot of women say in Bali when I've been speaking to them. A lot of women are in relationships and go through shit, and then they're like, well, that's just how it's going to be now. And I'm like, no, why are we lowering our self-standards? That is not how it has to be. But when you're committed to therapy, when you're committed to healing, that's when it doesn't have to be that way. If you just choose to reside and suppress, if you suppress, then yes, that's how it's going to be, because you can't outrun the things that have happened to you. If you have to heal, like if you don't heal those parts, they just repeat and they repeat and they repeat. So it's a commitment, and it can be an uncomfortable commitment and it can be an exhausting commitment, but committing to your healing so you do not carry the impact of those relationships and the heartbreak and whatever happened in that relationship forward into your next one. That's like one of the biggest acts of self-love ever, because what you're basically telling yourself is, if this relationship was shit, I don't want another one where the next one is going to be shit, or I now have a trauma response of being super masculine, so that's just how I am anymore. Like, no, we deserve better. And we are the only person, like I said before, we are the only people that is able to break those cycles that play out. Nobody else can break that cycle for us. It has to be a self thing. So me being committed to my healing right now is literally me saying, I am not staying in this hyper independent trauma response. I am softening into my feminine. I am learning how to be in a relationship and be super feminine and be held by a man and feel safe by a man. It would be so much easier for me to just stay in that hyper independent trauma response, but because the pain of unraveling it is just so deep. But I don't want to, because my deepest desires are to be held by a man. My deepest desires are to not have to be the strong one all the time, not have to do all of the things. And again, this is what, when I was talking about a breakup and it brings up parts of self, identities, it's like, wow, it's crazy. And let me share something with you actually that I've not spoken about, but this was like a really huge realization for me, and like really vulnerable actually to share. But in this process of breaking up with my boyfriend, one of the things I realized is my self-love response, part of it, so, you know, my identity, self-love, the things that I do for myself, part of that comes from a trauma response. And that is what made me realize that I am very hyper independent. I was in a hotel in Bali and I just booked the bath, the self-love bath, and I was having a glass of wine and I was sitting on, you know, just working by the pool. And I just all of a sudden felt this deep sadness and this deep loneliness. And I was like, wow, why am I feeling this way? And I look around me and there's couples everywhere. And one of the things I realised, I just immediately started to cry. And one of the things I just had like this realisation, like this smack in the face of, you do this for yourself because you were so afraid of missing out. So instead of leaning into that boundary of, these are the things that I want, because you'd continuously been let down and you continuously didn't get that, you just started doing it for yourself. And actually you were just so scared of missing out and filling a void that you just started booking dates and you just started doing everything that you truly desired, Lydia, somebody else to do for you, because that need wasn't being met. You just done it yourself. And I text one of my best friends, Annie, and I was like, I think parts of my self-love are hyper independence. Like, I think it's come from a trauma response. She was like, fuck, now you're saying, I totally see it. And I'm like, right, and that's huge. Like, that's really, really big. And unraveling that and stepping away from that, you know, it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take me getting triggered a million times over. It's going to take me having to be conscious with self and be like, Lydia, let yourself lean into this situation. If somebody's not doing the thing for you, don't go and do it for yourself. Just looking if this person is for you. Is this the person that you want to be with? Because actually now is the time for you to truly step into everything that you desire and be held and be seen and be met. So this is when I say, like, it's so huge, and the commitment to healing it's so it's just so oversimplified, healing. And it's actually, if you're going deep and you're going dirty with yourself, it's actually really difficult. And like, don't be fooled into the things that you see on Instagram. Like, obviously I'm not going to come on, you know, I'm not that extra where I'm always going to continuously film myself like having big meltdowns and stuff. Like, obviously I'm not going to do that, but these pockets, like my emailing list and my podcast, of where I will share the raw vulnerabilities of healing, without pulling my phone out like every single time I'm having a meltdown, because that just is not authentic to me. So it's hard. It's really, really hard. Other things that you can do are, Oh, writing a list of reasons why it was the best option to separate. So, or you can write a list of reasons of all of the pain that you felt and use that as like a go, when you're feeling that pull back. And I think this is especially a really, really good technique to do if you think that you're in a trauma bond or you're with somebody who's narcissistic. And one of the things I would say is, if you truly feel like you're in that relationship, please, when you feel ready, seek support. Like, please go to a therapist. Please make sure that your therapist has like some understanding of this, because it is going to be the biggest fucking thing that you do for yourself, and it is going to be incredible for your healing. So painful, but incredible also. So, and it's so much more complicated if you are in that type of relationship, and I think that professional support is just worth its weight in gold. Absolutely. Like, no amount of money can really sum up how important it is to just have that support there from somebody who understands the true situation that you are in and how powerful and complicated that situation is. And it's going to help massively with your sense of self and healing part of yourself and healing, those parts that have been manipulated and gaslit for so long. Like, it's just going to be incredible. So making that list is really amazing, an amazing technique. And these are things that I've used with clients as well in the past. So some of these things I know really, really help women on their process, because I've seen the way that these techniques work. So making breakup notes on your phone as well when you want to reach out. So again, what can happen in that grieving phase, in that back and forth phase, is when we have a thought, there's just a pull to automatically send it. One of the things that I recommend when you're in that phase of heartbreak is writing everything down on your notes. If anything that you want to say to that person, just write it down in your notes. And instead of sending everything to the person, just hold some stuff and just give yourself time and space. And if it gets to like 3 days later or 5 days later and you still want to send it and you feel like you're getting something from sending that, well, then send it. But when it comes and it's immediate and it's like, oh my God, I want to reach out to this person, just really take the time to pause and write it in a note, okay, or write it in a journal. Free writing is incredible. So just opening your journal and writing stuff down. A lot of inner child work. Again, when we go through a breakup, these cycles, these triggers are often stemmed from inner child. So a lot of my work has been inner child. It's came up in breath work, meditations, it's came up with cacao, it's coming up in therapy, it's coming up a lot, and it's very intense, the inner child. If I explained my breath work, you guys would be blown away. Literally where I went to was incredible. So I cannot wait on the retreat to do the breath work with Matt, because I know that it's going to be amazing. And I truly feel like in Bali, I've got to understand breath work a lot more. I've got to understand how it feels in the body, where it can take you to. So I really feel like I'm going to be able to hold that space as a facilitator, and also have Matt, who's, fully qualified in trauma, who's a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator. Like, the power that session is going to have will be incredible. So, yes, inner child work. So again, if you work with a therapist or you do any of your own healing, looking back at where these patterns could have potentially stemmed from is going to be crucial. It's going to help you break patterns. It's going to help you really, really heal parts of yourself and give your voice and give your inner child a voice as well. Processing each emotion, self-explanatory, but so important. Like, processing every single emotion that comes up, not skipping over any, not feeling like any aren't relevant, because every single emotion in the process of heartbreak is important. Taking time to observe your thoughts and not judging. You're going to have moments where your mind wanders off into what could have been. You're going to have times where you think about sex. You're going to have times where you want to have sex with your ex. You're going to have times where you hate them. You're going to have times where you feel, where your mind's just wandering to what could have been. It's totally normal. Please do not judge yourself for it. Again, that self-compassion is crucial. Set boundaries with yourself and write letters to the person you were with and yourself. So write letters, express your true feeling, write letters when you're angry, write letters to help you process. Maybe some of them you might want to write. I wrote a letter after a Kundalini session. It was super, super, super deep. And I wasn't going to send it, and then I wrote it, and I was like, actually, let me send this letter. Let me send it. Like, it feels really good to send. And I've also wrote letters to parts of self. So that 26-year-old version of Lydia that got into that relationship, and she was so fiercely loyal, and she loves her man more than anything in this world. I wrote a letter to her from myself now. I've had conversations with little Lydia about what the hurt meant, about what certain things were internalized as. So I've had all of these really, really healing, deep, transformative conversations with parts of self, whilst also speaking to parts of the other person. And that's been really beautiful. And then the last thing, I've just touched on it, but setting boundaries. One of the things I want you to know is not everyone deserves or needs to have all of your vulnerabilities. So when you're going through a heartbreak, not everyone deserves to know the ins and outs of your truest vulnerabilities. Like how that heartbreak is impacting you, how that feels, the things that you're thinking, the depths of your pain. So just be mindful of setting a boundary around that. Be mindful of setting a boundary around protecting your peace whilst honouring, all of the other phases of a breakup. But I think it's really important to know that just because you love that person and you feel a certain way, doesn't mean that you have to share everything. Some things only you need to know. Some things only you and maybe a therapist and a best friend, only you need to know. Maybe your best friend doesn't need to know the ins and outs of everything. Again, checking boundaries. Are you consistently always offloading to people around you? Is it time for you to go and maybe speak to a paid professional instead of offloading all the time to your friends? Like, just being conscious with those boundaries, okay? So some of the things I've done, being in grief and felt the depths of it, numb to avoid the pain, cried a million tears, took it back to basics, things that ground me, committed to my own healing, tried to be non-judgmental, connected back to my feminine and listened to my intuition, checked in before I've done things. Why am I doing this? And really coming back all the time. Why am I doing this? What is it that I'm needing in this moment? How can I give myself what I need? And stood in my truth, whatever consequences come from that are mine. So I spoke about the Jordan Peterson episode, and that was the biggest thing, and that was fucking life-changing for me, because from that moment, it's changed so much. Standing in my truth, and whatever the consequences that come from that, they're mine to deal with. They make my life worth living. So if that consequence is heartbreak, that's mine to deal with. It's okay, because you know what? It came from me standing in my truth. What was the alternative? Me not standing in my truth and me not having the heartbreak. But then I have the pain of not living in alignment and not being authentic and not stepping up for myself. So that was really crucial. So that is this week's episode. I hope that you did enjoy it. I hope it's been beneficial. Please let me know. Leave me a comment. Drop me an Instagram DM. I would love to hear back from you with this episode. And one of the last things I want to say is the Sacred 8 is now live on sale. So that is my new self-love meditation program, or self-love, self-paced program, really grounded in the power of meditation. And it's looking at the 8 areas that allow you to start to connect inwards, have more self-awareness, be more mindful, and start to really have control and connection in your life. That is on sale, and you can find the link in my bio. It has PDF booklets, it has meditations that I recorded, it had bonus meditations, and yes, it's something that came to me in Bali, so it's so beautiful and I love it. And that is what I want to finish on. Also, actually, we have 2 spaces left on the retreat. So if you are interested in joining us for the self-love retreat, please let me know. The link is in in the show note. And yes, thank you so much. I shall see you for another episode soon.